Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, and today's video is another video in my palette collection, August month, whatever you want to call it. I've decided to devote all of the month of August on my blog and here on my YouTube channel to eyeshadow palettes. And as you can tell from the title of this video, I'm going to be talking to you about my top 5 favorite high-end palettes. Now, something you should know is that a couple of months ago I did a favorite palette video as well. And that all featured more like high-end palettes, but I realized that those were like my all-time favorite palettes, as in those are my go-tos. They have been around for quite some time. I've had them in my collection for some time as well. And I realized that the palettes I showed in that video are all sort of at least 2 to 3 years old, maybe even a little bit older than that, especially when it came to like when the palette was released, even if I didn't have it in my collection straight away. All of the palettes that I mentioned in that video are already on the older side, so I decided that in this video I would talk to you about my top 5 favorite high-end palettes that have been released in, let's say, the past 2 years or so. So I've made a little bit of a selection. Maybe you can already guess from the sides of these palettes what they are. And I'm just going to talk you through them and tell you why they are my favorite and why I think that these are great ones. I'm wearing something completely different on my eyes today. And the only reason why that is A, I'm trying out lots of different colorful eyeshadow palettes this year because my goal for 2018 was to wear a lot more color, and we are slowly succeeding at that, so I'm happy with that. Plus, none of these palettes really go together very well, so I wasn't able to pair any of these shades really seamlessly into a look I felt. So I felt just going with something completely different again, and then just talk about these 5 palettes. So the first palette that I'd like to show you is this one. This is the Naked Heat by Urban Decay. Who doesn't know this? Because this was released last year, and it actually kind of was hyped up quite a bit, I feel. And for an Urban Decay palette, I think that was the very first Urban Decay palette in years that got that much love. This is definitely a good one. The quality is definitely great. If you're someone who prefers mattes over shimmers, then this is the first Naked palette that has more mattes than shimmers. So I think that that's also a reason why a lot of people love this so much. One of the gripes about this palette, at least that's something that a lot of people say, and I do agree with that, is that it's a very sort of samey palette. So all of these shades kind of look similar on the lid, so you don't get a whole lot of variety out of this palette. But if you have green eyes, or if you have, like me, brown eyes that pull more green depending on how the light hits them or what eyeshadow I wear, then this is a great palette, because this is definitely one of these palettes that just makes my eyes pop a bit and make them look a little bit more green. So if I want to go for that look, I definitely think that this works for that palette. You have some really nice basics over here, so if you want to do a very basic daytime look, that's definitely possible. You have some gorgeous shimmers, you have some deep shades, but nothing in this palette is super deep, I feel. The deepest it goes is this like purple, and that is the weakest shade in the palette. Ember is stunning, but it's a very sort of deep base color with a lot of shimmer to it, so again, it doesn't really deepen up a look. However, I'm not someone who prefers matte blacks and all that, so for my taste, this actually worked out really well. It is a little bit on the expensive side, as most Naked palettes are by Urban Decay, but this is definitely not the most expensive palette in this video today. The second palette I want to mention is one, of course, that everybody knows and raves about. This is the Modern Renaissance by Anastasia. I like this palette. Do I love it? I'm not sure whether I really get on board with the powdery texture of these shadows. I like it, but I go to this for very specific looks, which is why I'm one of the very few people on YouTube that doesn't have massive pan all over this palette. Because I don't really like these like lighter shades on this side of the palette. They are very sort of orangey, and if I want to go for something orange, I'll grab this. What I'm drawn to are these berry shades up here, like the berries and the reds. That's what I love this palette for, and I love wearing this in the fall time when I really want to do like a berry smoky eye. I really enjoy wearing Venetian red all over the lid, just swatched or just blended out with a very fluffy brush with a little bit of love letter on the edges to make it a little bit more pink. Maybe a bit of red ochre on the lower lash line, and that's like my go-to look with this palette. So I'm definitely going for the shades that hardly anybody hits pan on in this palette. I totally get the hype. This was definitely something new when it was released, which is why I get it. And I'm definitely looking forward to trying the new Norvina palette, which I don't think is out here yet. We are always a little bit behind when it comes to makeup releases. But that's the first Anastasia palette that not only am I hearing pretty good things about, it's also a color scheme that really appeals to me. Then this next palette, I'm not exactly sure when this was released, but I got this last winter, and this is the Just Peachy Mattes by Too Faced. And I'm not much of a matte eyeshadow person. Like, I will pull in a matte if I have to, but this palette is absolutely gorgeous, and I was able to get very distinct looks out of this. So for a matte palette, I think that if you're someone who really likes to put a good deal of shimmer on the lid like I do, then this palette is definitely one that can sort of hit that same itch but do an all matte look with it. You have enough variety, you've got some nice deep shades, some brighter pops of color. It's just a really great palette, and this is the first time I don't actually mind the scent that Too Faced has put in this palette. This is a very pleasant scent to me, so I do like this, and I really like this packaging that Too Faced started doing, which I think they're now doing also on their natural eyes collection, like the ones that used to come in a little first cardboard, then tins. They now have all been revamped to be put in this kind of packaging as well, and I think that Too Faced did a really good job doing that, because this is an absolutely handy palette to have. Then another one that I think that if you like berry shades and you think that the Modern Renaissance doesn't have enough berry for you, then I think this is a great palette. This is the LimeCrime Venus Extra Large palette. Now I know LimeCrime is a very sort of controversial brand. I know that a lot of people for that reason don't buy LimeCrime, if they did not anymore or just never started doing it. And I was never truly fully intrigued by their offerings till I saw this on Instagram, and I was like, oh, I need to get that. So I spotted this on Cult Beauty and I decided to snatch it up. I have only used it a couple of times, but every look that I did with this, colleagues came up to me saying, what are you wearing on your eyes? Because that looks really nice on. So you do get a lot of browns and sort of these magenta shades and plums and all that, which is very pretty. But you also get some neutrals, but I feel that all of the neutrals that are in this palette have this berry undertone to them, which is what I personally really like. It does go quite deep for my skin tone, Blank Canvas is the lightest shade in the palette, and it doesn't really work as a brow bone shade on my face, but because I'm just super fair, of course. But this is a stunning palette, and I loved every single look that I did with this. So I mentioned Urban Decay's Naked Heat not being the most expensive palette in this video, and that's because this beauty is the most expensive palette in this video. This is the Huda Beauty Desert Dusk palette, and I was never too intrigued by the rose gold textured palette because those textured shadows, I was just like, what's the point of those? And this is only one weird chunky glitter, which is this one right here, which I believe is called Cosmo. But I was just intrigued by the combination of very warm tones with those purples in the middle. It has some really interesting duochromes, some nice neutrals. Again, this is a little bit dark for my skin tone in the sense that the lightest shade isn't light enough to do any kind of highlighting on me, but it is still a nice base shade, and I can make these crease shades work, so that's really nice. And I really loved every single look I pulled out of this. I heard that this is a lot better in terms of quality than the original rose gold. I don't own that, so I can't compare the two, but this is an absolutely stunning palette. I love the quality of this. It has a little bit of kickback, but not as much powder kickback as the Anastasia, for instance. So I do appreciate that. And I just love the color scheme that this has. I think it's one of the more unique palettes in my eyeshadow palette collection. So despite the price point, I still think this was very much worth it. So those were the palettes I wanted to show you in this video, my top 5 high-end palettes that were released quite recently. I'm really curious to hear what you really enjoyed in terms of eyeshadow palette releases in recent years. Were these also some of your favorites? Maybe you have completely different ones, because I do feel that eyeshadow palettes can be quite personal when it comes to quality and what we all enjoy and like. So yeah, please let me know in a comment down below what you really enjoyed using. And please thumbs up this video if you enjoyed it, because that would really get me, help me to get my videos out there. And please subscribe, because I make new videos twice a week. And as I mentioned, for the rest of August, they will all be eyeshadow palette related. So if you want to stay tuned, that would be absolutely lovely. And I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!